All right, so for this demo, we're going to talk about how to create different kinds of symmetry in a logo or really any other kind of design. So essentially, I'm going to show you how to build the symmetrical components of this little kind of made-up logo here. In this logo, there are really two different kinds of symmetry that are happening. So first, there's just your standard kind of symmetry where the left side of the face is identical to the right side of the face. And then there is the radial symmetry, the radial component of each of these outer little kind of sun ray triangular shapes being perfectly spaced and mirroring one another. So let's talk about each of those individually. So first, let's talk about how to create just standard symmetry. A couple things to note here in terms of just how I've built this file or how I've set this up. My individual artboards are 5 inches wide, and so what I like to do is pay attention to my transform window, which is over here on the right. Your transform window it'll show you information about the x-axis and the y-axis, so x being your horizontal measurement. I have my ruler turned on, so you can see we're starting our measurement from 0 here in the upper left-hand corner over to 5 inches wide. Again, that's the width of the artboard. So that's my x, and then my y, same thing, starting the top corner at 0 down to 5 inches tall, and that's the y-axis. So the reason that's important is whenever I'm creating some of this symmetry, I want to really pay close attention to my measurements here, because ultimately what I'm going to do is I want to flip this face along this central point. And I want to flip it at exactly 2.5 inches, the center point here on the x-axis. Typically what happens if you were to just grab this set of objects and try to flip it, it flips on its own center point, which is, if we zoom in, you can see would be here at this little turquoise crosshair. So that's the center point of this object. We do not want to flip it on that point. We actually want to flip it on the center point of the artboard instead, which as I mentioned is, in this case, 2.5 inches. So what we need to do then is create essentially a sacrificial shape that is wider than the object we're trying to flip, which is why I've created this green rectangle here. This green rectangle is wider than my art. It is perfectly centered at 2.5 inches on the x-axis. So if I select both my artwork and my sacrificial green rectangle here, you can see now the center point is, like I said, 2.5 inches. So now if I go to reflect this, it flips it along that center point. And if I just hit copy, I've now perfectly duplicated my two sides. And so those are identical to each other right now. And then in this case, for this little eyeball, if I want to flip its highlight, I can just flip that on its own. And there you go. So I've now created the symmetrical face component here. Next, let's slide over and create the radial symmetry of this little sun rays, a little circular triangular design. So for this, again, I'm going to pay attention to where the central axis is. So if I try to just rotate a single triangle on its own, you can see its center point is right here in the middle of the triangle. If I were to try to rotate it, it's just going to really rotate on itself, and that's it. So that's not very useful for us. If I, however, grab two triangles in this case and make sure that they are centered 2.5 inches over, 2.5 inches down the center of the artboard, now their central axis is this middle point. And so now if I rotate those together, you'll see they are spinning around the center of our composition. And so double clicking on this rotate tool, I can pop open this little dialog box. If you keep in mind that there are 360 degrees in a circle, I can divide 360 by however many triangles I want. I think in this case I'm going to do 10 degrees. I know 10 degrees divides evenly into 360. If you choose a number that does not divide evenly into 360, it's going to create some funky kind of overlap and spacing issues in your pattern. So Always choose a number that divides evenly into 360. If you want to know, if you want to be real precise about creating an exact number, let's say in this case I want exactly 36 triangles. I can take 360 degrees and hit divided by 36 triangles, and then hit the tab button, and it'll do the math for me. So Illustrator InDesign, you can always basically treat their dialog boxes as a little calculator. You can type in mathematical formulas. It'll help you be very precise in the way you build your files. So here, like I said, rotating it 10 degrees, I can now hit the copy button. And if I just go to Command D and then hit that again, Command D is just going to duplicate the last thing I did. So rather than having to go back through the rotation dialog box over and over, if I'm doing something repetitive like this, I can just hit Command D. And there you go. I've now created that radial symmetry of those sun rays. That works really well if you have two objects, as I showed you. So we have two shapes that are opposite each other. So they're creating that little central axis point. If you only have one object, as in the case of this little flower shape, let's say I want to create a simple lotus flower design. It's just one petal that I'm trying to rotate here. I don't have two of them that are opposite of each other as I did with the triangle. So in this case, I again will create a sort of sacrificial shape. I'm going to create this circle here that encompasses my petal design. So it's larger than my design. Again, I'm making sure its center point is 2.5 inches down, 2.5 inches over on the X and Y axis. In this case, I want all of my petals to share the same point here. So I'm going to pay attention to the bottom point of this. And again, I'm putting that at that same 2.5 by 2.5 place on the artboard. So I now select both my circle and my little flower petal, double click on the rotate. In this case, I'm going to do 30 degrees and hit copy and then duplicate. And now I can do the same thing, but just doing negative measurement. So now I'm going to do negative 30, copy, copy, and now I've created this little kind of lotus flower shape that makes sure that each of these are perfectly spaced, the exact same measurement, very consistent. If we look in outline mode, we can see the precision of them all sharing the exact same point down here. So there you go. That is your quick demo on how to create a couple different types of symmetry in your designs.